And all the devotees are new, brand new to Krishna consciousness. Satsvarupa Maharaj Brahmachari was only in December of 1967, he was only a year and a half in devotional service. And so, I mean, just try to think of what it was like at that time when everybody was Americans, nobody knew anything about Krishna conscious culture, Vedic culture. Nobody knew anything about Indian culture. They only knew Prabhupada and what he taught them about Krishna. So I try to put myself back in that time and just try to imagine what it was like being with Prabhupada in the very, very early days of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Anyway, I'm gonna start reading a little bit from this book, and if you have uh, any questions or comments, just try to hold on to them. And oftentimes I think of things I want to say during the lecture, but by the time it's over, I forgot. So may try to, uh, if you have anything to say, try to hold it, remember it. Okay. One night about 2 weeks before Prabhupada left India for San Francisco, Satsvarupa dreamed that Swamiji had already come to Boston. When he wrote Prabhupada about this, Prabhupada replied, this is a letter that he wrote to Satsvarupa. You have described in your letter that my presence again before you will be wonderful. I quite agree that it will be wonderful to be with you. Your sincere prayer to Lord Nrsingadev is helping me to recuperate my health, and you will be glad to know that I am arriving in San Francisco on December 14th. I can understand that you are all thinking for me 24 hours, and therefore Satsvarupa had a dream that I had gone to Boston and was enjoying your company. Is she conscious? They were extremely Krishna conscious, and so they thought about Prabhupada all the time, and they were always reading his books and listening to his lectures and thinking about what he said and the times they had been with him. It's the first thing I noticed when I went to the temple at the end of 1970 was just how much the devotees were just so Prabhupada conscious and therefore so Krishna conscious. He was definitely the center of their lives and everything they did. So on December 14th, 1967, Srila Prabhupada arrived in San Francisco. The next day, a devotee there phoned the devotees in Boston and told them details of Swamiji's arrival. He said he might even be able to arrange for Swamiji to speak to them on the phone. At least he would try. Then one night the phone rang in the Boston storefront, and it was Swamiji. Jadharani, who answered, and every devotees know who Mother Jadharani is, I think. She was one of the first lady, one of the first devotees from 26 Second Avenue in New York City. She was the first artist in ISKCON, and she's still very active, still painting pictures of Krishna to this day, and she has a little temple of her own in Florida in the United States. Okay. And it was Swami Radharani who answered, said she had heard that Swamiji looked very healthy at the airport and that he had been walking quickly and was tanned from the sun. When Prabhupada mentioned that he had traveled all the way from India by himself, Radharani corrected him, but Krishna was with you. Satsvarupa was next. Swamiji, he began, we miss you very much. And Prabhupada replied, yes, and I am hearing you also. Then Pradyumna spoke to Prabhupada, explaining how he was trying to advertise Srimad Bhagavatam. Each devotee related to the others what Swamiji had said. Each admitted to having said at least one very foolish thing to Swamiji, but they agreed that everything Swamiji had said had been wonderful. Satsvarupa and Pradyumna's happiness became so great that they couldn't restrain themselves from rolling on the floor. They're two almost 30-year-old men, but they were so happy to talk to Prabhupada that they were just rolling on the floor in joy, laughing, and you can imagine it. And anyway, one thing is they each admitted to having said at least one very foolish thing to Swamiji. And with your spiritual master sometime, you might be with your spiritual master, and you might say something foolish or silly or dumb, because we are silly. We are do say foolish things sometimes. We're inexperienced devotees and aspiring young devotees, and we may say something even foolish to our spiritual master, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try talking to your spiritual master. Yeah, you might say something a little strange sometimes. I've done it plenty of times, and many times. They're very embarrassing, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. You keep trying no matter what. And the spiritual master won't take it seriously. It's not it's not at all a disqualification as long as our hearts are in the right place. Read a little more. Let's see. On the phone, Prabhupada had said that when he had left America, he had had very little hope of returning. Prabhupada had been very sick when he left. He had a very bad stroke, and he didn't know if he would recover his health and return to the United States and keep pushing on the very infant mission that he had started. But he had gone to India, and he did recover very well, did get his health back. Let's see. But Krishna had informed him that he was not going to die immediately, so he had returned. He had said that he was getting inspiration in Krishna consciousness from his own disciples, whom he considered to be good souls. Prabhupada later wrote the Boston devotees from San Francisco. These are Prabhupada's words. Although officially I am your spiritual master, I consider all you students as my spiritual master because your love for Krishna and service for Krishna teach me how to become a sincere Krishna conscious person. You may find a statement like that pretty amazing, but the spiritual master feels like that about his disciples. He sees his disciples as such good souls, such sincere young devotees or new devotees. So what if the devotees are young, new to Krishna consciousness relatively still? The disciples are all the devotees are all so sincere, such wonderful young men and women, or old men and women, but mostly young men and women, like all you there. So the spiritual master is inspired by seeing his disciples' sincerity, and the disciples are inspired by seeing their spiritual master. It's a very wonderful reciprocal relationship. He told them that although there were only three devotees, there were three devotees in Boston at that time, and at the end of 1967, there were only three devotees. They should each work for 300. A Krishna conscious person, Prabhupada explained, is never tired of working. Prabhupada saw this as a symptom of spiritual advancement in his disciples, many of whom never tired of devotional service and always wanted to be overloaded with more and more work. And that was my experience coming to Krishna consciousness, moving in the temple. And so many of the devotees that I knew, most of us were, we were young Americans, never had much responsibility, or mostly didn't work very much or very hard or do much. There was school and there were jobs, but we weren't very hard pressed in those days in general to take a lot of responsibility and work really hard. But as soon as we move in the temple, then immediately it's like every day, whole morning program, Mangal Arati, everything, and then work all day in serving in different services for Krishna. And we liked it. We like it. So that's the nature of work in Krishna consciousness, that it's susukam kartam avyayam. It's everlasting and it's joyfully performed. Material world, people take work as drudgery or just something, just got to do it. You got to do it. It's your job or whatever, your responsibility. But in Krishna consciousness, work for Krishna is everlasting and is joyfully performed. And Prabhupada liked that spirit in his disciples. And you see all around you, like Mukunda Lila Prabhu and Mother Devahuti, they're always extremely busy serving Krishna. And they said like a perfect example of Krishna consciousness. So, of course, a lot of you are in college or maybe have jobs. So much of your attention has to go to those things, but still, as much as possible, be engage. We have to engage ourselves directly in temple duties and preaching, studying Prabhupada's books, and all the most basic things. And it's good. We feel good when we do that. Okay, I'll read a little more. This is about Mother Jadavani and her painting service. Her service to Prabhupada was, even from the beginning, in his apartment at 26 Second Avenue, she would paint pictures of Krishna all day and every day. And that's what Prabhupada wanted her to do. Prabhupada really wanted paintings of Krishna and Krishna's Leelas, his devotees, and he pushed for that from the very, very beginning. Let's see. To each of the three devotees in Boston, Prabhupada had given a specific engagement. Jadharani's was painting. Prabhupada had told her to increase the beauty of Back to Godhead magazine with illustrations. He had especially commissioned certain paintings, Radha Krishna in Vrindavan, Lord Vishnu, Lord Chaitanya with his four principal associates, Lord Chaitanya and his associates performing kirtan, as well as paintings of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Swamiji himself. Since Jadharani didn't have much art training, her first paintings had been crude, and Prabhupada had sometimes laughed to see a picture's defects. But he had been pleased with Jadharani, who chanted Hare Krishna while she worked and executed each painting just according to his instructions. If she stayed absorbed in painting, Prabhupada said, that wherever she lived, she would be as good as Vrindavan. Prabhupada wrote to Jadharani asking her to gather other female disciples interested in art, form an art department, and flood the world with paintings of Krishna. The paintings, she said, were like windows into the spiritual world. He instructed her in many of the details of painting. And that was my experience when I first started going to the temple and seeing the incredible artwork all over the walls, many of them, I'm sure, painted by Jadharani. We still have so many of her paintings here in the Boston Temple because she stayed here for some time, and this is one of the first temples. So we have a lot of the original paintings by some of the original artists in Krishna. They're very wonderful. And when I heard one of the devotees say what Prabhupada had said, that these paintings are windows into the spiritual world, I said, boy, that makes total sense to me, because when you look at paintings of Krishna, we never had any paintings of Krishna in the United States, especially by a initiated devotee in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya under Prabhupada's care, especially not such. We didn't have any paintings of Krishna here, and so when I first saw them, it was, and I heard windows into the spiritual world, and I said, that makes sense, because that is exactly like that, like looking into a completely different world, a wonderful place that I had never seen before. Although there were people and trees and cows and buildings and everything was there, and that I'd always seen my whole life. But these were transcendental paintings of Vrindavan and Mayapur and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. And it was literally looking into a different world, a spiritual world. And this is a nice section here. I'll read this bit. Eager to improve her art, Jadharani began studying the great masters but when she painted Narada Muni after the style of Raphael, one of the European famous artists from the 15th or 16th century, something like that, Raphael, Prabhupada said that Narada looked too sensuous. He said he preferred her first painting of Narada, although it had not been much more than a stick figure, because she had carefully tried to follow a print he had given her. Seeing the new sensuous Narada and hearing of Jadharani's plans to study art and sell her paintings, Prabhupada replied critically, "You are already a great artist. You don't want to become a great artist to satisfy the senses of the public. If your present paintings are not acceptable to the general public, I do not mind. They are fools. You continue trying your best to make your pictures as far as they can be nice looking, but not to satisfy the senses of the rascal public." Yesterday, I was in a Unitarian church in Boston here. Unitarian is a Protestant denomination, and there's hardly any ritual or it's almost like a hippie religion or like a New Age religion. It's a Protestant denomination, but it's very lax. I used to go to Unitarian Church when I was young, and that's what it's like there. So, but Prabhupada visited one of their churches. Maybe he gave a lecture there. Yesterday, I was in a Unitarian church, and there I saw two pictures of only logs and bamboo. And it was explained to me by our great artist, Govinda Dasi, that these are modern abstract art. Anyway, I couldn't see in them anything but a combination of logs and bamboo. There is nothing to impel my Krishna consciousness. So if you want to be a great artist in that way, I will pray that Krishna may save you. Anyway, if the public doesn't buy, we don't mind. Why you are anxious for selling? We shall distribute them to devotees without any price. If our things have no market in the sense gratification society, that does not mean we are going to change our principles. We are meant for satisfying Krishna, not anybody's senses. That should be the principle of our life. Anyway, then this paragraph here. Jadharani became despondent, feeling like a fool and a deviant disciple. She wrote Prabhupada only a brief reply. For several days, she moped. You know, moped? Mope means just sort of drag yourself around the house and all sad and everything. So she moped for several days, considering her situation hopeless because Prabhupada had criticized something that she wanted to do that she thought was a good idea. She thought, I'll go to art school and become very accomplished artist. And Prabhupada said, don't bother doing that. You're already a great artist. You're pleasing Krishna by your sincere uh, work, painting his picture. Then he wrote a letter to her saying, comforting her and reassuring her, but re-emphasizing the point that we're not out to just please the public. We try to be pleasing, we try to make a nice presentation in everything that we do, but kirtan or art or whatever we do, we try to, be ladies and gentlemen and give a good presentation, but we're not responsible for how they feel about us if they don't like the something that we do or the way we present ourselves. It's that's not important. The important thing is that we're pleasing our spiritual master, pleasing Krishna by our service, and they are pleased. And and Prabhupada makes the point in his letter to her that we don't have to work so hard to improve in any particular skill. We only have a short amount of time in this life. Even if you have like 50, 60 years, it's still a short amount of time, and we have to perfect ourselves in our Krishna consciousness. That's always the overriding, overwhelmingly important principle in our lives, in everything that we do. So we don't have to be very concerned about anything else. The overwhelming principle is just to purify ourselves, allow Krishna to purify us, and work in such a way that he will, and go back home, back to Godhead. Okay, I'll read just a little bit more. Let me see. So this next section is about Pradyumna. Pradyumna, Prabhupada called him Panditji, because from the very beginning, he was just a very intelligent, very scholarly young man and began studying Sanskrit right away. He's a very intelligent person. He's still active in Krishna consciousness today. I think also somewhere in Florida. In the United States, many devotees have settled in Florida, especially in and around a place called Alachua, devotee farm community down there. There's probably at least 1,000 devotees have get settled down there, having families and everything. So it's a very wonderful Krishna conscious community. So Pradyumna Prabhu is still active in Krishna consciousness in ISKCON down there in Florida. So this is to a section about his service to Prabhupada. Pradyumna's service was Sanskrit. Prabhupada encouraged him to become expert so that one day he would be able to assist in the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Although to help support the temple, Pradyumna had taken a clerical job with an insurance company. When he wasn't at his job, he would usually be in the basement of the temple studying Sanskrit. A natural scholar, he began accumulating books and talking to Sanskrit students and professors at Harvard, where a prominent professor allowed him to audit one of his Sanskrit courses. Prabhupada gave Pradyumna as his first assignment in Sanskrit the rendering of English synonyms for the verses of Brahma Samhita. He also assigned him specific books to study, and Pradyumna took to them with enthusiasm, even avoiding the chores Satsvarupa asked him to do in the temple. Prabhupada, Satsvarupa puts it like that here, in very mildly, but I'm sure at the time he was a little irritated with Pradyumna for not doing the duties he was supposed to do. But anyway, he was the first Sanskrit scholar in ISKCON under Prabhupada's guidance. Let's see. Prabhupada was pleased with Pradyumna's work, and this inspired Pradyumna to work more and more. But when Pradyumna sent a list of books he wanted to read to Prabhupada for his approval, Prabhupada, although interested in Pradyumna's scholarship, warned him of the dangers. And this is a letter from Prabhupada to Pradyumna Prabhu. Regarding the book list, Lord Gauranga by S.K. Ghosh and Vedar Parichaya by Ban Maharaj are useless, and you may not get them. Ban Maharaj was a godbrother of Prabhupada's, but Prabhupada didn't want Pradyumna to read his books. The other books and the Gaudiya paper are acceptable. I am glad to know that you are working hard to expand the Krishna consciousness propaganda in Boston. I may say that this practical devotion is the secret to understanding the Shastras. My Guru Maharaj used to say that for one who is not engaged in devotional service, reading all the books is simply like licking the outside of the honey jar. One who thinks the book is the thing is content in this way, but we should learn the secret to open the jar and taste the honey. In this way, if we can simply understand one book, one shloka, the perfection is there. Lord Chaitanya warned about reading too many books. Although I see in America this is very popular to get volumes and volumes of books and not understand one. Anyway, by sincerely working and by carefully executing the instructions of the spiritual master, you will all be successful by Krishna's grace. I am always praying to Krishna for your advancement in Krishna consciousness, all of you sincere souls. That's the main point is Prabhupada emphasizes again there is the relationship between the spiritual and the disciple is not just an official thing. Like, yes, I took initiation, I have my spiritual master, and it's much, much more than just an official thing. It's a very personal, intimate relationship. Of course, it's not that you can be with your spiritual master all the time or very much personally. Some devotees are, some few, but most of the disciples aren't. But you can always be engaged, like Pradyumna. Prabhupada specifically wanted him to study Sanskrit so he could help Prabhupada in his translating and book production work. And he wanted Jadharani to paint pictures of Krishna for his temples and for his books. And for Satsvarupa, that's the next section. Satsvarupa was transcribing Prabhupada's dictation of letters and the Krishna book and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So when you have your spiritual master, the important thing, very important thing, is to get involved in something, some kind of service that's specifically dear to their heart. And it's not hard to find out what that thing is, because the spiritual master gives lectures and writes books and is very explicit and vocal about what he wants from his disciples. And if you're fortunate enough to get involved in some really particular personal service with your spiritual master, translating for him or editing books or something like that, cooking for him or ironing his clothes, then definitely take advantage of those opportunities whenever they're presented to you. But all the time, all of this service to the spiritual master is intimate, personal, devotional service, a transcendental relationship completely on the spiritual platform. You don't have to be talking to him on the telephone or speaking to him personally or ironing his clothes in the next room or painting for him in the next room or studying Sanskrit, but all the service to the spiritual master is completely personal. Chanting your japa is personal service to the spiritual master. Going out and preaching engagements is personal service. Presenting yourself as a devotee and acting as devotee, that's personal service. Reading Prabhupada's books, or if your own spiritual master has his own books, then reading their books, that is service. Chanting Hare Krishna is personal service. Okay, so I'll read a little more. When Prabhupada noticed spelling errors in the Sanskrit words in Back to Godhead magazine, he asked that Pradyumna standardize the Sanskrit transliterations. Pradyumna had the aptitude, and Prabhupada hoped he would become a successful scholar. Satsvarupa's special assignment was typing and editing Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam dictations. Prabhupada had first given Satsvarupa this assignment in New York in 1966, and Satsvarupa had continued when Prabhupada had gone to San Francisco early in 1967. And Satyarupa had continued. Later that same year, when Prabhupada fell ill and stopped dictating, there had been no more tapes for Satyarupa to type. But as soon as Prabhupada had returned from India, he had again begun translating Srimad Bhagavatam. He had written Satyarupa in Boston, asking him to rent a dictating machine. As soon as you let me know that you have one dictaphone there, I will send you the tapes regularly. By the end of December, the tapes had begun arriving at the Boston Temple. Plastic reels, Grundig dictation tapes, wrapped in a simple business envelope, stapled and addressed in Swamiji's own hand. First, they had come at the rate of one a week, then more quickly, 2 or 3 a week. Satyarupa had set aside the early morning hours for typing before going to work, even before the others had risen from bed. So the others rising from bed was probably about 4 o'clock. So he was probably getting up at like 2 o'clock and typing and transcribing Prabhupada's dictation. And he's always been very austere. Even now in his old age, Satyarupa Maharaj is still very austere. And anyways, he would sit on the kitchen floor listening to Prabhupada's voice through earphones and typing. This is even better than getting a letter, he would think. It was Swamiji himself teaching the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Satyarupa became so attached to his service that his whole existence began to revolve around it. He could feel a pang of love for every United States mailman he saw in the city, because it was the mailman who delivered Swamiji's tapes. Yeah. So Satyarupa he was the first one to hear the early cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was the first disciple to hear the Krishna book. And and as soon as he would hear one tape from Prabhupada and transcribe it, he would tell all the other devotees what he had heard from Prabhupada. And that was a very common thing in early ISKCON, not only by him, but by the devotees in general, that as the volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam came out 1 or 2 at a time, and then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they were coming out gradually, and devotees, as soon as they got them, they would read them. No one had ever heard them before, except Prabhupada. No one had ever heard them before. So as soon as they got them, they were read them and talk to the other devotees and say, you know what I read today in the 3rd canto or the 4th canto, and Prabhupada's lecture tapes were coming out one at a time regularly, and they were sent all over the movement. And devotees would immediately listen to his tapes and talk about them. And that's a practice that we can still definitely do today. Like when you read something in one of Prabhupada's books or listen to one of his lectures or room conversations or morning walks and on your computer or your iPhone, you could immediately you hear and read so many things that will grab you and strike you, and as soon as you hear something, just tell somebody else, another devotee, what you heard that day, what you read. It's one of the most basic functions, things that were done in early ISKCON. All, the books were coming out one at a time, and devotees were actually very studious, and the devotees would read the books as soon as they came out. So do that, and tell other devotees, oh, I read this today, or I heard Prabhupada say that today. That's a very extremely good habit to get into, a very good practice. Does anyone have anything they want to contribute? Any questions or comments? Or I can read a little more. All right, I'll just keep reading a little bit more. It says restart required. I can still see them. I don't know if they can still hear me.
I think they should be able to hear you. I think it's okay.
Okay. So I read a little bit more, and yeah, so now it's 60 years later in ISKCON, but still we're at the very beginning of ISKCON in the material world of Lord Chaitanya's mission to spread Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always fresh, always new, always exciting, always wonderful, because it's Krishna, and Krishna is always new and exciting and wonderful. And so every day in Krishna consciousness is a new adventure, a new opportunity to please Krishna and get very close to going back home, back to Godhead. Let's see. Although Satsvarupa considered himself expert in hearing Swamiji's voice, because in the beginning all the devotees were American, and most people didn't even know any Indians, so to hear Prabhupada's voice in the beginning was a little bit hard to understand for a lot of people. It was a little hard for me, but I caught on pretty quickly. But anyway, although but yeah, but practically nobody even knew any Indians back then, and Prabhupada's accent is pretty strong, and okay. Although Satsvarupa considered himself expert in hearing Swamiji's voice, on one tape there was one word he couldn't understand. Prabhupada was describing the demon Hiranyaksha's birth from Diti, and to Satsvarupa it sounded like by the pores, Pores, of the pregnancy of Diti. He thought Prabhupada said, pores of the pregnancy of Diti. The whole universe went dark. How could Diti's pregnancy have pores? Pores on the skin. Prabhupada wrote back that it was force, Force, not pores. Prabhupada wrote, the best thing will be as soon as you typewrite the tapes, send me one copy after editing. I will keep one copy with me, and you keep one copy with you. And Prabhupada was always very conscientious about keeping the details of all different kinds of work in very good order. He had been in the business world his whole life, that he had his own companies and worked in different pharmaceutical companies throughout his married life. So he was very used to being very exacting and and particular about the details of all kinds of work. And so he was always impressing that kind of conscientious work on his disciples. And we're meant to be like that. Like in the early days, it was a hippie life, and many of the peoples came out of the hippie life. And the thing there was, just be yourself, just do your own thing, and don't worry about all these, details. And one thing back then was that you don't wear a watch. Because what difference does it make what time it is? It's just, we're alive now, and that's all that matters. We're just living freely. You don't need to wear a watch. But as soon as Prabhupada, uh, uh, they started being with Swamiji, he always wore a watch, and he was always very particular about time. Things should be on time, and he's very conscious of all those details. So devotees began wearing watches and living a much more regulated and uh, regulated life. But yeah, sometimes while riding on the bus to work, Satsvarupa would fall asleep and dream of hearing Swamiji's voice in his ears and himself replying, rapidly typing. It was a very personal service. Prabhupada had 9 tapes, and he wanted to keep track of how many were with Satsvarupa and how many were on their way back to him. I have sent 1 tape this morning, Prabhupada wrote. Probably you are getting it tomorrow. So far, I received your edited copy of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is nicely done. So especially for his transcriptions of his tapes, Prabhupada was very, very particular, very particular. His books, his transcriptions of his tapes were like the most important thing. So he was always in very close contact with Satsvarupa about keeping the tapes coming back and forth in very regular order, not missing any days or there shouldn't be any delays. And that's also Satsvarupa Maharaj's nature too. So he was well suited to that type of work. But Prabhupada was extremely demanding about everything, but you might say especially about his tapes. Okay, so I guess I'll stop and gonna go to bed. You guys are gonna go to school or work and have fun today. Chant Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank
So
you for
let us thank our
listening.
Prabhu. A lovely chanting 3 times. Haribo! Haribo!
Haribo, Haribo,
Praise
Haribo.
Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Srila
Jai,
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
I'll see you
See you
soon.
soon.
Hare
Haribol,
Krishna. Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Radha. Haribol.
It's
So
Aradita.
nice to see you after a long time. So we request Prabhuji, they'll be waiting for you next week also.
Next week, probably, almost for sure. Almost for
Yeah,
sure.
almost
99%.
sure.
If you want
90?
me, I'll be there.
We really want you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. All glories
Right.
to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Bhaktivinoda Prabhu ki jai.